Alrighty guys, this is Snugs on Blitz, and I'm back with another video for you today. Now in this video I'm going to be counting down the top 10 best tier 10 medium tanks. Does the AMX-30B make my list? No, it does not. How about this tank, the FV-4202? The gun, lovely. C'est magnifique. Maneuverability, fantastic, but not much in the armor department. And so I've chosen tanks that I think are easier to play for newer players. This is definitely a pro player tank, so I would not recommend it for the inexperienced. Anyway, let's jump right in. At number 10, I have to give it to the T-62A. Why does this make the list? Well, the gun is like a sniper. The turret, pretty impervious. The only thing that lets this tank down is the speed. It's not as fast as many of the other medium tanks, which is why I'm not going to put it higher on my list. I think a lot of people, newer players, will kind of struggle with this tank simply because they will push in too far, they'll get into too much trouble, and they won't be able to get out of dodge. That's why I'm putting it at number 10 on my top 10 tier 10 medium list. Coming in at number 9, the WZ-121. Now personally, I love this tank. I think it hits hard. It plays more like a heavium than it does a medium. The armor profile is troll. The turret is very strong. It's agile. It's got a gun that can really do the business. But I think a lot of newer players are going to struggle with this tank because of its lack of gun depression. A lot of maps have hilly terrain, making this tank sometimes awkward to position. It's not as tough as the tier 9, which has horrible gun depression, even though it's been buffed a little bit. But this tank, you will struggle sometimes because of the hilly terrain, and you'll end up shooting into the stratosphere if you're not careful. Once you understand gun depression and how to take advantage of your turret and your armor profile, this tank can really be a tough customer to deal with. However, I think for newer players, this isn't a must-have tank. You've got to know how to use its characteristics, and that's why I can't put it higher on my list. But yes, once you understand how to use it, I think this tank is a must-have. So, anyway, that is my number 8. Anyway, let's move on to my number 7 tank. Coming in at number 7, I'm going to give it to this tank right here. The OBJ-907. Now, as you might be able to tell, this has a very similar playstyle to the T-62A and OBJ-140. Naturally, I mean, it looks like a copy-paste tank in many ways. So what does this tank have going for it? Well, it's low profile. Look at that. It's just so low to the ground. Its advantage is also its disadvantage. I think newer players might struggle using its low profile and finding good positions to shoot from. However, if you know how to use gun depression and your low profile, I think you're in for a whale of a time. This is a fun tank, and most pros seem to think it is the best of the 3 tanks. I'm torn. I think it really depends on your playstyle. If you like speed and being sleek, I think this may be the tank for you. Anyway, that's why this tank makes my number 7. Anyway, moving on. At number 6, I'm going to give it to this tank, the Progetto 65. Now this tank doesn't have the best armor, but it can get the troll bounce every now and then. But what it does have is a fantastic gun. It's the only tank on this list that has an auto reloader, and it is just lovely. You peek up, you take a few shots, back on up. The great thing about this is you don't have to worry about how many shells you have in the magazine because it will automatically start reloading. You also don't have to worry, like the new system, the auto reloader, is that you don't have to worry about the time between the shells because it will just take the same amount for each shell, and making it a really devastating tank because you can just move around and not even think about it. What you want to do is just hide, use your gun depression, which is pretty dang good, and wait for those opportunities to be able to shoot 1, 2, or 3 shots. That makes this tank, in my opinion, very versatile. I love this tank, but I think newer players might struggle with this simply because of its lack of armor compared to some of the other tanks that make this list. That's why this tank is number 7 on my top 10 tier 10 medium tanks. Coming in at number 6, I'm going to give it to the M60. Why? Well, it's not the smallest of tanks, that's for sure. Compared to the 907, this tank is as big as a house. But what this tank can do is use ridge lines to really take advantage of its good gun depression and its great turret. It's not the fastest of mediums, so you want to play it more slowly. Just take your time. Just be patient with this tank at first. You want to eliminate the faster tanks and the tanks that don't have good gun depression. And then later on, deal with the slower tanks and just get around them and punish them with your DPM and decent mobility. Yeah, I didn't really think I was going to get that shot in. I think the best way I can describe this tank is a fat, slow ninja. Yeah, it's fast enough against the slower tanks. It's not fast enough against the more maneuverable tanks. But what it does have is a great turret, so it can bounce a few shots here and there in the right positions. And yeah, I think this is a solid tank for a newer player, especially if you want to learn how to take advantage of gun depression. This tank can really teach you that. So that is my number 6. Coming in at number 5, I'm going to give it to, yes, the brother of the M60, the M48 Patton. Now this tank used to be an easy pen because of its giant cupola, and it was pretty big, but ever since it's been redesigned, this tank's turret is absolutely fantastic. The other day I was playing against it in my E4 and I could not pen its turret any which way. He was just in the right position, and I was using APCR, I was using AP, and I was just getting bounce after bounce, and it was getting really frustrating. So just like the M60, you want to be using hills and hilly terrain to take advantage of this great turret and its solid DPM. It's got very good maneuverability actually, and unlike the M60, it's not as big as a house. So in many ways, it's just a souped up M60 in my opinion. And that's why it makes my number 5. Coming in at number 4, I'm going to give it to the T22. Why? Well, quite simply, the armor profile. Dang, this tank can be a pain to deal with sometimes. With it wiggling and using its maneuverability, it can get some of the craziest bounces. Its pen is not the best, which is why I think you're going to have to choose your targets carefully. But doing so, you can really unleash your DPM and torture enemy teams. Angle it, wiggle it, take advantage of its DPM, and you have got a solid tank. In many ways, this reminds me of the OBJ-252, except in medium form. The pen is not the best, so you might be needing to use that APCR, those gold bullets of yours, to take full advantage of this tank. And you're going to struggle from time to time to pen the heavier armored tanks, but still, the armor on this tank can give enemy teams fits, and the DPM is fabulous. Get behind enemy teams and just unleash that DPM. And that's why it makes my number 4. Coming in at number 3, I'm going to give it to the STB. Why? I'm going to make this short and sweet. I think this is a better M60 and M48 Patton. Why? Well, it's faster. It's more agile, it's got better gun depression, and the turret is as strong, if not stronger, than the other 2 tanks I mentioned. What newer players will struggle with is its pen. So don't be afraid to use APCR against those stronger targets out there. All you want to be doing is using the ridge lines, peeking over, just showing the edge of your turret and let your enemy shoot that, and they will struggle all day long to pen this tank. In fact, if it's just peeking over, just switch to HE, because unless you've got a super TD that can hit it with APCR, I don't think you're getting through this turret unless you're super lucky. So anyway, that's my number 3. It's really short and sweet. Moving on to number 2. Coming in at number 2, I have got to give it to this tank, the E50M. Why? Well, this tank has something for everyone. It's got armor, so you're going to bounce a few shots. It's got speed. It can get around the map and get around tanks. It's got a great gun. You can play it as a sniper or you can play it front line. And on top of that, you have got quite good maneuverability for such a big tank, and it's such a heavy one as well. Yes, it's not as fast as some of the other tanks on this list, but dang, this tank can really bully a lot of other medium tanks. I mean, look at this. Boom, right there. Look at that shot. It's got a sniper of a gun. It can do the business. I think this is the most noob-friendly tank in the game because you can use it in so many different ways. Yes, it's a little bit big, and that's the only thing that's going to let you down, but it's forgiving because of its armor profile. It's got decent speed, helping you get out of trouble. It's got something for everyone, and that's why it makes my number 2 on my top 10 medium tanks of tier 10. So, what makes my number 1 tank? Well, remember, when it comes to this game, armor is the most useful thing you can have, especially when you're a newer player, because you're going to make a ton of mistakes. That's why most of these tanks on this list have great armor. However, drumroll please, coming in at number 1 is... Yes, here we go, and yes, it may come as a surprise, but I have chosen the TVP 50/51. This tank is all about its gun and that incredible firepower. I said armor is the most useful thing for a new player, but honestly, the best armor you can have is not even being shot in the first place. You want to play this tank as a mobile 183. In this tank though, because of its speed, you can get around your enemies and unleash that incredible firepower. So that's what you want to do. As soon as the enemy is fired, you're going to make your move. I'm going to take a hit for my trouble here, but boom, 1. And another one, oh well. I've still got 2 shots. I'm going to get around him. Look at that speed. It's glorious. And from behind, there's not much he can do. So here we go. Boom. Boom. What you want to be doing in this tank is eliminating targets. That's what makes this tank so strong. If you have 2 or 3 tanks that are low health, you can just go boom, 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 and they're gone. If you don't have any other targets except, fully armored tank, then, just unleash that firepower and whittle them down. Watch this. Here we go. I'm going to come around the corner here. IS-4. Get ready. Don't have any other shots, so I'm just going to go for him. Boom. 1, 2, 3. And one more for good. Look at that. 1,300 damage in a medium. In a matter of seconds. This tank is insane. So many pro players are getting 6K. Even new players are getting 6K. This tank, played right, is an absolute beast, and that's why it makes my number 1 of the top tier medium tanks of tier 10. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Snugs on Blitz, out.